In the previous sessions, we were honored to have Bishop Emeritus Hua Yong as our speaker. And today's session, we are honored to have Miss Annette Arulrajah. You know, both Bishop Hua Yong and Annette exemplify in their lives the essence of servanthood and what it takes to be servants for the long haul. So without further delay, allow me to introduce to you our speaker for today. So can I have up the slides again? This lady, my friends, this lady is someone who has faithfully obeyed God's call to the student ministry when she graduated from University Science Malaysia more than 30 years ago, my friends, 30 years ago. She has served as the General Secretary of FES Malaysia, and she is currently now the IFES Regional Secretary for East Asia. This means she journeys alongside leaders, staff, and graduates from the 18 countries that comprise East Asia. Her passion for God and His Word had made her a friend to people from all walks of life, and she has inspired them in encountering God through His words. Crazy is how many would describe Annette, including herself, as she shares stories of her own exciting adventure with God. She is also known as Grandma Annette for those of us who actually met her in Camp Cameron. Yet, it is a privilege for many of us that we can call her our friend, who has journeyed and inspired our life in serving our awesome God.
Tahan Lasak.
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 Hi, my name is Joanne, and currently I'm a Year 4 medical student in RCSI and UCD Penang Medical College. So, what is Tahan Laksa? To me, Tahan Laksa is being strong, courageous, and tough in facing challenging and difficult situations. Just like in the Bible, Joshua 1 verse 9 say, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and not be dismayed. For your Lord, your God, will be with you wherever you go."
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb. For me, I think Tahan Lasak means able to remain in the Lord in every situation, in every environment, and also in every phases of life.
In my opinion, Tahan Lasak means perseverance.
Tahan Lasak bermaksud kekuatan dari segi fizikal, mental dan juga rohani.
For me, I think that Tahan Lasak means that you can withstand something, or you are eager to resist something.
To me, Tahan Lasak means going the extra mile.
Tahan Lasak means very strong, very durable, and doesn't break when someone hits it.
大汉拉萨对我来说就是能承受很严峻和棘手的情况，它需要很大的耐力和不放弃的精神去坚持到底。
It means being able to push through despite challenges.
Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be able to be with you this morning. I'm really surprised that, all these years the Lord has kept me in this way, and surprised that, from being a clown, from being a crazy person, the Lord can use anybody for His kingdom. And, this morning as we go into Tahan Lasak second session, I just want to recall some things that we already looked at in the first session 2 weeks ago. As I was sitting together with you and hearing Bishop, really my heart was strangely warmed and also moved as I heard him, because as he was speaking, I know he wasn't just speaking words. He was speaking a message which he had been living through his life for the past 73 years. Servanthood, a ridiculous call in a world that is so crazy about power, authority, position. And he called us to re-examine our lives. He called us to re-examine how are we living out God's heartbeat for servanthood, even as we serve God, even as we live out our discipleship, even as we try to change the world through our living. Now, this morning, I continue from where he leaves off. Of course, I'm not bishop, and he's one of the people I look up to. So I'm probably a next generation that comes after him. But we try to live, and we try to live Tahan Lasak leadership for the long haul. What do I mean? It doesn't mean that we become leaders forever and ever. It just means that we are called to live out this message. Live out, not speak out. Live out this message that we are the servants of the Most High. For as long as we have the opportunity to live on this side of the earth. So really, once again, welcome all of you who are here for the first time and those who are here for the second time. And I pray that during this time, the Lord will bless you and minister to you. This morning, this is the Lord's highway where he wants to speak into our lives. And I pray that our ears are ready and our hearts are ready to hear him. I'd like to start with a poll. You know, I'm going to soon stop sharing, and the poll will be shared. Please click on the poll. You know, when you take a poll, you don't take like an exam where you take your time to answer. Try to give it the answer that comes to your mind as soon as you can. Your, what do you call it? Your reactive answer, you know, without thinking. But try to finish all the question, and please, in a poll, there are no right answers. So as we begin the poll, let me stop sharing and take your time to look at the questions and then give your answer. Okay, the poll is, you can see it on your screen. So can you just go one by one, scroll down, and then until question number 6. Let me start with question number 1. If you are with me, then you can click as I read the question. If given an opportunity to serve as a leader, would you be likely to say yes or no? That's the first question. So can I see that you begin to answer already? And then, okay, let me wait for more of you to start answering that question. Don't wait until everything is over. Now, question number 2, how would you rate yourself as a leader on a scale of 1 to 10? You know, 1 being very inadequate and 10 very effective. Now, how among these qualities, number 3, which would you rate highest as a leader? You know, for you personally, is it being a visionary? Is it being an inspirer? Is it being a listener? Is it about being a truth teller? Is it about being a person of integrity? Choose one. Question number 4, among the commodities or things that you would guard in your leadership, would you guard the stewardship of your time? Would you guard your life accountability, that you remain accountable to people? Would you guard your relationships with others, that they are not minimized? Would you guard your time with God, or your God conversations, time where you can spend talking with God? Or would you guard your obedience or your followership of God? Choose two from this. Okay. Question number 5. In terms of our readiness to be a leader, which is the most important when you are trying to choose leaders? Would you choose someone with a sense of a God-given identity? Or would you choose someone with great inner character? Or would you choose someone who has the ability to be a servant? All right. And last question. To be a long-haul leader, one needs to be a lifelong learner, or does one need to be a hardy and tough person? One needs to be a visionary at heart, or one needs to know how to detox, the things that bug us or are like thorns in our life. We need to know how to let it go. Please spend your time. We have a few more minutes to choose before I give the direction for us to end the poll. Yep. When we look at the results, 70% of us would probably say yes to leadership. Yeah. And there are still some of us who would say no because of many different reasons. Yeah. And when we look, how would we rate ourselves as a leader? Quite the highest percentage is at 29%. People would say above average, 6. But quite a number of us also found ourselves on the lower rung, 5, 4, and 3, and even 2. And there are also a good number of us who are ranking ourselves and saying, yes, I am, a good leader as best as I can be. Now, when we look at these qualities, I purposely chose these qualities because it's hard to choose one. But obviously, being a listener seems to come out on top. A leader who listens. Yeah. And the second highest is a leader who is a person of integrity. Your character matters. Yeah. The others matter as well. All right. At different times of our leadership. But these two things seem to be high on the list. What would you guard? And almost all these things are equally as important. But obedience, God followership, it seems to be highest at 54%. Our relationships with others, the well-being of our relationship, seems to be second highest at 53, and third highest is our God, time with God, our God conversations at 43%. Yeah, and life accountability as well. Now, when we look at our readiness, when we choose people, are they ready to be leadership? Almost 67% of us chose to be a lifelong learner. And really, all the others are important, but the more we are learning, the more the Lord will use us to influence others. Yeah. And thank you for taking this poll, but I'd like this reflection to remain with you. Can we stop share for a while? The poll results. Thank you, technical team. And I want to say this. There are many things about leadership that we will be trying to focus on, but there are some very important things, and most of them are unseen things. They're not things that people can see. So they are about our followership of God, whether we are obeying God, whether we are having conversations with God, whether our character is of integrity. Many of these things are not seen. And, sometimes these are the first to go. Yeah. And as we move on, I would invite you to also continue your reflection as you watch this next short video clip. The question is, are you a leader? And sometimes we feel as a leader we have to be many things. But Bishop, in 2 weeks ago, already pointed us to the main direction that being a leader is really an upside down call. It is going to change our lives, our world. We will never be the same again. Why? Because when God calls us to serve, He calls us and He tells us that there's no place for an obsession. Bishop told us 2 weeks ago that yes, the world needs leaders who can appraise the situation, leaders who can seize opportunities, leaders who can give clarity of direction. And yes, there is a leadership crisis because we don't find enough of these people. But those who want this kind of leadership, many are driven by ambition, power, competitiveness. And then Bishop held up for us that for the Lord, what He calls invites us to, is just to be a menial doulos the Greek word for a lifelong, not just servant, slave, one who has given up his rights and who says, I am your slave for life. So there's no place for obsession. But today, I also want to say there's no place for just short horizons. You know, we need to look for the long haul, because leadership is not one moment in time. It is a continuing drama. In fact, it's a connection of the dots of our lives as the Lord uses us and touches lives. You know, it's not one point in time. It is God authoring our story through invitations to serve. It's about what He is doing in our lives. Have you ever thought God doesn't need any one of us to be His leader? He gives us the opportunity because He wants to do something in our lives. And it is for the long haul, because God is not a consumerist. He doesn't use us, and when He's done with us, He throws us off. So if you're thinking it's just for 4 years, I'm in campus now, leadership is for 4 years now, then you're mistaken. Because if you look before this, and then as you look ahead of you, God is continuing to write His story in you. It's about your discipleship and mine. So there's no short horizon when we think about leadership. It's for the long haul. It's not about positions. It's not about roles. It's about living our discipleship, as what Bishop called us to last week. You know, when I look at what it means to live out this upside down call, I found that it's really no end of adventure. I want to just share with you a little bit about my own journey in leadership. You know, I come from a family where I was born into a family where leadership was the norm. My parents were leaders. They were key leaders of the church. They were key leaders in society. And our mom raised us that whether you hold leadership in the church, or whether you are in school as a prefect, or in society in an organization, it is God who put you there. So, you know, I was born into this kind of a family. We were looked up to as a family for leadership. We were expected to be leaders. We were expected to excel. So, you know, already at 10, I was thrown into leadership. And, you know, until I was 20, I felt it was my right to be a leader, that I deserve to be a leader. I come from this family of leaders. So, you know, in school, it was about being prefects, monitors, head prefect. And then in church, about presidents or committees of different groups that I belong to. There was one point that I was very upset with my school, because when I went to the morning session at Form 5, the teachers refused to appoint me as the head prefect. Because when I was head prefect in Form 2, in the afternoon session, they said I was too playful. And I, who felt it was my right to be a leader, was very insulted and offended. And then I went on to university, and from 20 to 24, when leadership was thrown to me, especially in the Christian fellowship, I felt it was my burden. It was like a burden. You know why? I decided when I went to university, I wanted to excel as a student. So, you know, the very first committee meeting, when the president came to fetch me on his motorbike to go for the meeting, this is the question I asked him, and I saw his face falling. How long is the meeting going to be? I need to come back and study. And it was really a burden for me. But when I left campus, the Lord called me to student work, and I sensed for the next period that, yes, you know, being a leader, serving God was actually a calling. And then I went on as a staff worker for many years, and I felt really it's a privilege because I looked at who I was and I didn't deserve to be in the Lord's service. And so it was a privilege. Around the age of 40, I'm sure you are shocked that I'm already 40. You would have thought I'm 25, but never mind. Get over your shock. At the age of 40, when I was placed in some places of leadership of our organization, I felt it was a cross. It was a cross that I needed to carry because along with leadership at that level came many pain, discouragement, also encouragement, but it was heavy. And after that onwards, and now I'm still in IFES, serving as one of the leaders or servants. And really, I counted both my cross and a privilege because I think to myself, who am I that God would want to use me? So really, our journey as servants is going to be twists and turns on the long trail. It's not going to be one point in time. It's not going to stop after one position or role that you do. It's how God is discipling us. And on the journey, when we face twists and turns, it's easy to fall or to fail. And so, my friends, at this point, I would like to send us off into breakout rooms for 15 minutes. Now, this is what you do when you go into your breakout rooms. Don't spend too much time introducing yourself. There's only 15 minutes. But talk. Just brainstorm means no need to censor your thinking. So just storm. Why do you think leaders often fail? So as you share, please, one person in the group be the recording person and list down the list. And after that, in the last 5 minutes, choose top 5. Why do you think leaders often fail? Okay. And if you have time, get to the second question that we can prevent these failures. All right. I would like to move on. But you see, when we are talking about leadership for the long haul, we need to know that there are twists and turns, and there are many things that can cause us to fall. You see, many of us, we have put pride as one of the top things in many groups. Top 2, pride and ego. For some of us, it's about abuse of power. It could be no sense of direction or calling, too many hurts, many reasons that cause us to stumble in the long haul. And when we want to talk about the long haul, then unresolved personal issues, we need to be able to look at these things and know they will come. And how do we grow ourselves in our person and our discipleship so that we don't stumble and fall in these areas? Now, to continue where we stopped, at the twists and turns of this trail of long haul leadership, I would like to look at some Bible characters. And one person is whom he's often referred to as a servant. A servant, Joshua, in the Old Testament. And if you look at his story, he doesn't just suddenly take up leadership in Joshua chapter 1. He was not an unintentional leader. God had already planned and put in place many things about his life. So if you read in Exodus 17, Numbers 13 and 14, he was already a leader of the tribe of Ephraim. And he was one of the 12 who was sent out by Moses to spy the promised land. And remember, only he and Caleb came back with a report that with God, we can. All the others said, no, we can't. There are giants in those places. Later on, when they actually came out of Egypt, they were attacked by a group of people called the Amalekites in the valley of Rephidim. Now, during that time, Moses did not fight. Moses went up the mountain and he was praying, but he told Joshua, take some people and lead the people to fight. So Joshua was also a military, a soldier who knew how to lead his people into battle. But if you look at that account about the Amalekites, it's very touching because after the victory happened because Moses kept his hands up on the mountain praying to the Lord. And when he got tired, there were two men who helped him to hold up his hands. And God says in verse 14 of that chapter, please tell Joshua that this happened because of God, not because of his ability to fight. So, Joshua went through many lessons before he became a leader. It's just that we don't see it so intentionally, as we read our Bible. Not only that, Joshua was never under the spotlight. Most of the time you hear him, he's going up the mountain together with Moses to serve as his servant. When they go to the tent of meeting and Moses meets with the Lord, Joshua was there. How do I know that? When you look at Exodus 33, it says, when Moses went down, Joshua stayed behind in the tent of meeting so that to ensure that the light in the tent does not go out. But do you know what else happened when he was serving as a servant? He had a close-up view of Moses talking with God. He knew firsthand, this is how God comes through for the people. But Joshua was not perfect. He wasn't untainted, And so, yes, he learned on the job. He made mistakes and there were risks that he took. So, for example, some of the stories from Joshua chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 9. The first one, chapter 5, was when, they were going to go to battle to take over the land of Jericho. They met a man with his sword drawn. And Joshua asked him this question, are you for us or are you for our enemy? And the man answered, neither. I am the commander of the Lord's army. Straight away, Joshua had to learn that you don't ask the Lord to be on your side. You choose to be on the Lord's side, And then in chapter 7, where he was the leader, but among his people, there was somebody who had stolen stuff that God had asked them to destroy. And Joshua had to learn that, no, we need to help this person to own up. If not, though, all of us will get into trouble. And in chapter 9, if you read carefully, there was a group of people, they were afraid of being conquered. And so what they did was they cheated. They pretended to come from far away so that they won't be conquered. And Joshua and his leaders believed them. And if you look at the scriptures very carefully, in chapter 9, it says, they did not inquire of the Lord. He learned from his mistake. You don't do things without inquiring from the Lord. So that is Joshua. He made mistakes, he fell, but he rose. Then there is another one, an anointed as a king, the first king of Israel, Saul. And when he was anointed, he was a humble guy. He was a surprise appointment because he himself said, why would you choose me? I'm from the least of the tribes of Israel. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. Why would you choose a king from this tribe? But God chose him. But along the way, what kept stumbling him was this. He was insecure. he didn't ever resolve his identity that he was God's chosen. So, every time somebody came, he felt threatened. He felt afraid. He felt insecure. And the greatest insecurity for him was David. As he saw David becoming more famous, he began to feel jealous. And it made him do things that really took him out of the game of leadership. Not only that, even before this jealousy with David, there were things that he did, his character, where there wasn't integrity. If you look at the PowerPoint in 1 Samuel 13 and 15, what the priest needs to do, the priest needs to do. But he was impatient when Samuel turned up late. He took into his hands the offerings and went into the temple to offer unto the Lord. And the Lord was displeased. You talk about some of the reasons power crazy people. Saul was a power crazy person. And another time when the Lord says, destroy all the enemies, all their sheep and cattle, Samuel goes to meet him, and there he can hear the moos and the bars of the best sheep kept aside. So there was a lot of covering up, and he went on that way and completely disqualified himself. Now, you and I know stories from among us. I've seen a lot of people over time. I remember a president of a Christian fellowship who was doing so fine. His leadership was exemplary. But, after a while, he couldn't keep it up because he came to confess that actually he had been sleeping with his girlfriend and the guilt was stumbling him. He thought he could remain hidden, and it was hidden. Nobody knew, but he couldn't continue. Or we have a person who, as long as this person was a leader, showed such great leadership. But once the role finished, the next we hear this person is getting married to somebody who is not of the faith. She became a Muslim. And, it was very painful that we see ourselves as roles. And after that, our lives can go anyway. God is not interested in short horizons. It's long horizons, Or I just spoke last week to my colleague, a young man from Francophone Africa, French-speaking Africa. He's 35 years old. He almost gave up leadership, not because he fell, but it was painful to continue being a leader because in June last year, his sister died giving birth. 2 weeks later, his eldest brother, who was coming out to meet the parents, met with an accident and died. And 2 weeks later, his father, who was heartbroken, who stopped eating, died. So overnight, he became the head of the family. Overnight, he inherited his brothers and his sisters, orphaned 7 children. Overnight, he felt so helpless, he wanted to give up. So there are many things that can cause us to fall or to think, I cannot continue serving the Lord. And if you look at the Bible characters, there are many who had this Achilles heel. What do I mean? This guy called Achilles, he was a Roman soldier, strong in every way, but he had one weakness. It was his heel. There was where he was very weak. And when the enemies attacked him, they attacked at that point and he died. Many of us have one point, just one point that often acts like an Achilles heel. And if I look at some of the Bible characters, I chose those that spoke to me. There are many more, so you can come up with your own list. Cain was the first one I came across. The Cain syndrome is where we give God a half-hearted offering. something convenient like, nah, take this. Because we think, God is demanding too much. So Cain's problem was that he gave an offering that was not wholehearted. Then you see Samson, a strong judge, called to lead his people. And yet here he was flaunting his rebelliousness, sleeping around with women not of the faith. And God took him out of the leadership. You see Solomon, the wisest king, and his weakness, his Achilles heel, was that his heart was lured, taken away to worship other idols because he married too many wives and he had too many concubines. So the sin was not these wives and concubines. The sin was that they pulled him away. His son, Rehoboam, his weakness was that he listened to the wrong advisors. When he needed to make a decision, people came to him and said, your father was very cruel and harsh. Can you be kinder? So he went and asked the old advisors, what should I do? And they said, yes. Tell them you will be kinder and this is how you will do things. Then he went and asked all his young friends, what should I do? And they said, no, tell them if my father was harsh, I'm going to be doubly harsh. And you people learn to submit. And so he listened to the wrong advisors and he made a wrong choice. Judas, one of Jesus's disciples, is an example where he had his own agenda of what serving God or what following God is about. And that was his downfall. Elijah, the great prophet, in his down moments, he had abandonment issues. He felt abandoned by everybody and God. But you see, some of these people, they made their way back, but most didn't. And I'd like you to just take 1 minute to think about yourself. Where is your weakness? What are your potential weaknesses that can cause you to go out of line? Just 1 minute before I move on. It's very easy for us to look at, you see that famous leader, he fell, Ravi Zacharias. Oh, look at this church in Singapore, this leader fell. I would find it very hard to do that because it could be me. Maybe I was saved because I had some people who advised me. God saved me. But it could be me. I have potential weaknesses that can cause me to stumble and fall and be out of the game. I want to go back to this person that we looked at first, Joshua, and tell you some things that will give you encouragement for the long haul. I had asked you all to read Joshua chapter 1 before coming. Now, the theme of this Tahan Lasak for the long haul, the tagline is an adventure of faith, an adventure for life. And really, if I look at Joshua, his was an adventure of faith. And it wasn't about him. It wasn't about how good a mentor Moses was. It's about who God was in his life. So when you look at chapter 1 and you hear these words, after the death of Moses, you see all the people gathered there and there's no longer Moses. And they are all gathered together and it has been declared Joshua is their new leader. It's a very tough time. And you need to know who are these people who were standing there with Joshua. They were not the old people who came out of Egypt. They were not the ones who had seen the miracles of God parting the Red Sea. All those people had died because they sinned. So this was a new generation who had heard secondhand about God's miracles. But in the desert, they did see some miracles. They saw how God fed them, the manna, for all these years in the wilderness. And you know, that was the defining moment in chapter 1, Joshua chapter 1. As they stood there and God first addressed Joshua. He knew it was a painful transition. It's a new generation that had to be led into the promised land. A new generation who didn't fully know all that God could do firsthand. It was a new leadership, of course, because they had seen Joshua around. But you know, Joshua was like the quiet guy, and Moses was this tough leader. And now Joshua was their leader. They had to move to a new era, from wandering around. To go into the promised land means they needed to fight. They needed to become soldiers. Because the promised land is not like, ta-da, I cross and I get all my promises. They had to conquer the land for themselves. So they had to overnight become soldiers. It was painful. And it was at that moment that Joshua looked at all the transformation he had gone through, the tough transformation. All these years in the wilderness where God had hidden him, but trained him, you know, given him a chance to be a leader, watching close up how Moses and God interacted. It was preparation. It was school. He was schooled by the finest lecturer, Yahweh. And then, remember I told you, he was the one who was sent to fight the war against the Amalekites. Here was a man already prepared for war. He could lead them to conquer the promised land. So, you know, in the first few verses of chapter 1 of Joshua, when God says, get ready to cross over the land that I am about to give to the Israelites, he says in verse 3, I will give you every place you set your foot on, as I promised Moses. And then God sets out the map. You know, this is what Joshua learned. It's not him who set out the map. God already charted the adventure. God already drew the boundaries. And then in verse 5 says, assuring Joshua, no one will be able to stand against you. And verse 6, I will be with you and I will never leave you or nor forsake you. God is telling him, you are not going to be abandoned and I'm going to be traveling with you. Now, if it's you or me, you'll say, are you sure or not? Can or not? But you see, Joshua had been a leader for the long haul. He had already seen this in the past, how God had been with Moses and he could take God. And then we move into verses 7 to 11. And there you see God's specific commands to Joshua himself as the leader. And there were 3 things God said. In verse 7, be strong and courageous, be careful to obey all that I have commanded you. Now God was telling Joshua, the one thing that will help you is when you cling to me unwaveringly. Not your power, not your ability. Keep on my side, obey my words. Verse 7. Verses 8 and 9, God told him, keep this book of the law always on your lips, meditate on it. And then verse 9, haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you. Now, he had to not just keep on the Lord's side. He had to keep on the Lord, in the Lord's presence. holding on to God's word, holding on to God himself. And that is the only way he could lead. Now, most of us leaders, we need to show that we can do things without God. Through our great gift of speaking or leading. But there was one other thing he needed to do as well. And in verse 10 and 11, it says, go through the camp and get the people ready. To be a leader, you have people who follow you. Now, God told them in 3 days, tell them to get ready, consecrate themselves, be prepared to be on my side, and I will lead you. Now, this was important because if you were an Israelite standing there under Joshua's leadership, if Joshua had come and told you, get ready, we are moving out. In 3 days, we are going to cross the river, you'll say, hello? Are you crazy? Because it was flood time. The Jordan River was at 20 feet high. Nobody in their right mind will cross at that time. But Joshua needed to help the people know God's promise and God's timing, not their timing to cross. That is a leader, keeping the people ready. And Joshua had to learn that lesson. So he went and talked to the people. One other thing he had to do from verses 12 to 18, you will see this story. There was a group of people, the 2.5 tribes of Israel. Now, earlier on, they had asked Moses, where we are now, which is east of the Jordan, we would like to stay here. And Moses, mind you, inquired from the Lord and said, yes, you can. But when the time comes to cross, you cannot say, we got our land already, y'all go. You have to go with your brothers, help them to fight the war, and until they have rest, you cannot rest. And Joshua needed to lead these people, to invite them to a sacrificial advance, And how did he do that? Firstly, if you look at verse 13, he called them to remembrance. Remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you? So he's calling them to remember, go back to where they had made this promise so that they could go forward in this sacrificial advance. And it would have cost them, because Joshua told them, leave your wives and children here, you cross over. And how do they cross over? In verse 14, it was really a call to sacrifice, because he said, all your fighting men be ready, who are ready for battle, must cross over ahead of the fellow Israelites. What does that mean? It means the first to die will be these 2.5 tribes who already got their land. They don't need to sacrifice. But they would have to go right in front and die, even die when they fight with their enemies. More than that, in verse 15, until the Lord gives them rest, and you're going to think like, how long more? You see, you and I, 2 years of COVID, all our leadership went haywire. How to lead the CF, how to continue the work, how to lead our church. It was tough, 2 years. I had my friend who knows a bit about history to help me to understand how long it would have taken for them to come back home to their wives and children. 7 years. 7 years, they wouldn't have seen their wife and children. By 7 years, that their baby would have grown up. If their child was under 10, would have become a teenager. They needed to do this sacrificial work, but as a leader, Joshua used the right way. He called them to remembrance. And if you look at the verses 16 to the end, verse 18, all the people, the 2.5 tribes says, we will do what you say. How nice, right, if our people follow what we say. So at this point, we have heard what the word of God says, and I would like to give you a 3-minute break in case you need to rush to the washroom or you need to go and get something before I bring this to a close. All right. So please keep these words of Joshua in you and go for a 3-minute break. And I will start 3 minutes exactly. Welcome back, my friends. I don't know whether I've got through to you the adventures of faith that Joshua had. When we come as leaders, when we come as servants of the Lord, it is the Lord himself who schools us. You know, and so for Joshua, it was an adventure of faith forged and groomed in the wilderness, in the experiences he went through. And we need to be thinking about the experiences God is bringing you through. And that is where he is forging in you the readiness to be his servants. And to continue to the last point, this is a call, as the tagline says, an adventure of faith, an adventure for life. I hope none of you are thinking, okay, after this 1-2 years, I'm over with the Lord. I've done my part. God is not interested in your service. He doesn't need you. I told you that. It's about his work in us, schooling us, shaping us. I never imagined the kind of school I would go through other than going to USM. I also went to UPM. But that is not the main school that I went through. The school of life has been where God has shaped in me what it means to be a disciple, to be a servant. You know? And I want to talk to you about our last speaker, Bishop Hua Yong. I hope he's not here, and I know he's not here, so I can say these things. But he has shared these things about himself. You know, he and I, at this point in time, we both live in the same town, small town of Seremban. And there were two things about him that he's very passionate about. He wrote a book about migration, and he encouraged Malaysians not to migrate because he said we need the Christians to stay back and rebuild the country. And then, you know, and then the Lord called him because of his great mind, you know, his mind, you know, great theologians, their mind is weird. So, you know, Bishop Hua Yong has a weird and great mind. So they called him, invited him to start a theological center, Asian theological center in Singapore. So, you know, he had to move to Singapore to start this center. So how is he going to keep his word, not to move or migrate? This man, for many years, used to travel 3 days in the week. He will take a train, not a flight, train from Seremban to Singapore, which is about 5 hours. And by Wednesday nights, he would arrive back in Malaysia and spend until the weekend in Malaysia. Monday, he would travel again, just to do his work, just to steward his gift, his brain, his mind, to do Asian theology. How did I know this? One night, on a Wednesday night, you know, our church is very near the bus stand and the train station. So, you know, one night I parked there to go to the mall, and I was getting into my car and I heard somebody call my name and I couldn't see who it was. And then I saw it was him, Bishop Hua Yong. That time he wasn't a bishop. Then I asked him, what are you doing here so late? He said, this is my life. Every week I travel. And he looked so tired, so worn out. But he kept his word. He never migrated. He did his stuff in Malaysia to shape Malaysians to be true Malaysians. And at the same time, He lived out his gift as an Asian theologian at the center in Singapore. Then why did he come back? And why did he become a bishop? Was it because he was offered this great, prominent title? He will tell you, he never wanted to be a bishop. In fact, one of the persons who was tipped to be the bishop at that time was his younger brother, the late Reverend Hua Qian. Reverend Hua Qian died suddenly in a car accident as a lorry hit him as he was changing tire on the side of the highway. Overnight, he died. And during that time, the Lord convicted Bishop Hua Yong, you need to come back to Malaysia. Malaysia needs you. Avail yourself. And that is how he became the bishop of the Methodist Church. For the long haul, through the difficult things, you persevere. Through the tiring things, you persevere. Through the heartbreaking things, you persevere. Similarly, too, when I became a staff worker, I wanted to quit so many times. I counted, there were 6 times I told my mother, you know, Mom, I'm coming home. I want to quit FES. Can I come home? Is there a place for me to stay at home for a while until I find another job? And you know, all the 6 times, this is her answer to me. Yes, you can come home. But she told me, why you want to quit? You were the one who fought with me to join FES. Now you want to quit. You stay there and I will pray for you. So, you know, I could never quit because my mother prayed for me. And really, that is long haul. You have people who come alongside and journey with you. Oftentimes as a leader, because being in front, you are not sure. Are you doing the right things? Or when you do the right things, there are many people who are not happy with you. I felt like a failure. And often I come to the Lord and say, why do you want to use a failure like me? And you know, like Joshua in the wilderness, God, you need to know how God has brought you, and there you hear his voice saying, be strong and courageous. Last year, at the start of COVID, I was on a sabbatical, 3 months. After 32 years of work, I had my second sabbatical. I never knew that the sabbatical will expand 2 years, so I got to rest for 2 years. But during that time, one of the main messages God gave me was this Hebrew word, ahava. He kept assuring me through many different passages that I was ahava, cherished by him, because the years of service made me feel there were parts of me that were missing, that were crushed, that were distorted, you know. And I wanted to show you just 3 weeks ago what I found in a shopping mall. I had had a terrible week in leadership. I had told the Lord, do you even hear my prayers? Do you even hear the cries of us who are crying out to you? And I was in a shopping mall called Sunway Pyramid, walking in a artist shop, and I saw this. And God told me, this is your answer. All this while, I've been carrying you, and I will continue to carry you. And so that is the adventure of life, my friends. You can't quit your discipleship. And if in that discipleship, God calls you to serve or to a place of leadership, you do it. Because the adventure
Quit, don't quit.
Is about
noodles,
quitting or not
don't
quitting.
Noodles. You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying, yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Real life's a little bit more complicated than a slogan on a bumper sticker. Real life is messy. We all have limitations. We all make mistakes, which means, hey, glass half full, we all have a lot in common. And the more we try to understand one another, the more exceptional each of us will be.
Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
Get you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim.
Your story may not have such a happy beginning, but that doesn't make you who you are. It is the rest of your story. So, who are you, Panda?
Maybe it can, if you are willing to guide it, to nurture it, to believe in it.
But how? How? I need your help, Master.
No, you just need to believe. Promise me, Shifu. Promise me you will believe.
I will try.
Good.
Ow! Jeez, what was that for?
It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
Yeah, but it still hurts.
Oh, yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. Ah! You see? So what are you going to do?
First, I'm gonna take your stick.
No, not a stick!
There is no secret ingredient. It's just you.
But we have to try. So no matter what type of animal you are, from the biggest elephant to our first fox, I implore you, try. Try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us.
And that, my friends, is the adventure of life. That we avail ourselves for God to teach us. It's an adventure of being slaves or servants. You know, like what we heard 2 weeks ago from Mother Teresa, never saying no to Jesus. It's frightening, yes. But you need to know who holds you, who carries you. It will always be a lived tension between power and powerlessness, between position and servanthood. Choosing again and again our free will offering to become Christ's slave. That is the adventure that God calls us to. It is also the adventure of being vulnerable. You know, where we live our fallibility, where we live our fallenness. Sometimes we fall. But what matters is that you pick yourself up again, because God gives second chances. If I stopped at my failures, by now I'll be famous for all my scandals and my failures. But God gave me second chances and I will never forget. And how do I do that? Living for the long haul means I live the examen. There are places where I can examine myself and know, be honest with where I am. You know, if you talk about those public figures who fell, they never had the space to examine themselves or the place to be accountable to somebody. Do you have Nathans in your life who will tell you the truth? Living accountability. That is how we can live our adventure of life. You know, an adventure of slavehood, an adventure of vulnerability, and last but not least, an adventure of sacrifice. It is sacrifice. You know, again, 2 weeks ago, we heard from Bishop, there's no bargaining at God's counter. Yes, we live the cost. We pay the cost. It's painful sometimes. but nobody has paid the cost more than the Lord himself. And when you are lost, be like Joshua, live in remembrance, bring yourself back to the place where you were before you got lost, and remember all that God had done or had done in your life, so that you can find strength to go ahead. Live without withholding. Live unwithholding. Pour yourself out, because God is no man's debtor. So as I end, I want to say this. Nothing more to say. I have nothing more to say. But preaching this message is not about words. We preach with our lives. So go, live a Tahan Lasak leadership. It's an adventure of faith and an adventure for life. I pass the time back to Gabriel.
Thank you, Annette, for the message that you shared with us. And thank you for different one of you. We have received your questions. And do note, because of time, we will not be able to address all of it, but we'll do our best for today's session. All right. So if we are ready, can we also have the screen for Slido up so that we can also see the questions together? Annette, here is the first question that our participants are asking. Why is it so hard to lead? How do we deal with discouragement when people just don't want to follow? And the negative effects of serving, of being a leader. How do we not become jaded and distorted?
So, let me give you a very cheeky answer very quickly. If people do not need to be led, there's no need for leaders. If people are not resistant, they don't need anybody to push them. So we are called to be leaders because people need to move to a place. And so often, there will be all kinds of people in our midst, those who are eager to go and those who are afraid. And if you look at them as not people who are hard-hearted or stubborn, but people who are afraid, people who don't see the need to obey God, then our role is to bring them across, just like Joshua needed to bring a generation that didn't know the Lord firsthand across, helping them to have confidence in the Lord. And so how do we remain not jaded? Do you know that I learned the hard way? When I was a younger staff worker, I was so busy. And every time people say, oh, Annette is a very busy staff worker. Now they say the same thing, but okay. Very busy. She's always doing this, always doing that. But at that time, I cut corners. I was so busy that I didn't have to meet with the Lord. When I preached, I took it as, I'm reading the Bible, I'm learning, getting my food. Now, for many years, without just 2 hours of having coffee with the Lord in the morning, please note, I didn't say quiet time. It's coffee with the Lord, where sometimes I'm just wrestling with him and saying, I got nothing left. This morning I came and, after a full day yesterday, I came back home. I said to God, I have nothing to give. And it's the Lord, that time with God. And if we compromise in the time with God, where we can tell him anything, our complaints, who else we got to complain with? You complain to outsiders, they say you're gossiping. Complain to the Lord, and the Lord will raise you. He will show you another way. So I can't become jaded. There have been seasons, yes, and people needed to help me, pray for me. But the only way not to become jaded is not to compromise on your God conversation. So honestly, I'm not joking. I'm not so holy, but 2 hours every day. So, if my meeting starts at 8 o'clock, I'm up by 5:30 so that I wake up a little bit and sit there. There's a place where I sit. That's my meeting place with God. And we talk. In the course of the 2 hours, yes, I will read the word. I will also pray for the people I'm concerned about. Without that, you will become jaded because it's discouraging. Leadership is discouraging. Next question.
Okay. Thank you, Annette. Just so that the rest of you know, we actually also have combined the questions. As we notice, there are similar questions. So we combine it to make it one question. So the next question is this, Annette. So our participant asked, so this question, there's two parts to it. This is about how do we respond to our leaders and as a team member. The first one is this. If a fellow leader has been having a lot of issues, causing rough parts between all of us as the leadership, how do we deal with it and move forward? And then the second part is this. If that is my leader and I as a team member who is unhappy with my leaders, how do I deal with this without bordering on to sin and insubordination?
I have to be careful because often I'm on the side of the leader. I mean, yeah, okay, but I want to say this. Often the mistake we Christian leaders make, nice guy. There has to be in the team, and it doesn't have to be the designated leader, but there has to be somebody in the team who is like a Nathan. Nathan was the prophet who spoke into David's life and told him, but it's not public, in front of everybody, you humiliate the person, but you call this person aside and say, this, is causing all this trouble. And if the person still does not agree and still causes trouble, then I will actually say, maybe because of this, you should consider stepping down. All right? Maybe. But I would have had to try everything to speak into his life, because why? God's heart is to shape this person to be his disciple. So he may be stubborn, he may be this. We don't discard him. We help him as a Nathan would, speaking truth into their lives privately, and having tried for a time, this person is not willing, then the person needs to make a choice. You want to stay or leave? Okay, that's one. So sometimes I needed to make the decision for myself, stay or leave. Because if I stay, I feel I'm causing trouble and I can't agree. But if I'm the one who see it in my leadership and I don't want to be insubordinate, you see, often what we do is we gossip. Because we are so unhappy, we gossip to other people who will hear us, and we say things about our leaders, and we hantam them. And then when we come, we are quiet and we appear to be together with these people. But my suggestion to you, that is not honoring to the Lord. That is sin on our behalf, even though we don't openly say it. Because we are gossiping and we are actually telling other people and actually causing. So I forgot to tell you, in the Gibeonites, when the Gibeonites case, in Joshua's case, the leaders made a wrong decision. They didn't inquire of the Lord. The next few verses, guess what? All the people grumbled against their leaders. They started gossiping and they didn't want to follow. And it's hard to move. No, we need to keep as one. Whether you're a leader or not, we keep as one. And if I find I'm bordering on insubordination, I talk to people who can help me. And I also talk to my leaders and say, hey, I find it hard. So, 3 weeks ago, I talked to my leaders and told them I found it hard to take some things that they had decided upon. And I took the risk because they could sideline me. But I need to do that. My honoring is honoring God. I need to be consistent and humble before God. Not about showing a nice face to people, but behind I'm doing something else. So it's about you being a good character before the Lord. And so if you find it hard to honor these leaders, talk to them. And if after that we still cannot find a way, Learn how we can work together. Talk about how you can work together. Be honest, but don't please murmur behind.
Thank you, Annette. Do we still have time for another question? Okay, we will take one more question. Okay, we'll take one more last question. Huh? Okay, so this question, Annette, is about guarding ourselves and guarding each other. So here is it. Since we know pride and arrogance are some reason why leadership fails, how then do we guard ourselves against it? And the other part is this. In this whole Christian faith, we've been taught to keep each other accountable. But when a fellow leader has fallen, how do we then hold them accountable?
You know, these pride and arrogance and also accountability have to do with people in our lives. So there's no way you can do lone discipleship. So there are many of us, we like to be lone leaders or lone discipleship. And it won't work. Or many of us who don't like feedback. And we get offended by feedback. When people give us feedback, we keep it like as if, in our heart and it simmers. No. This is biblical discipleship. That we live as a community and the community can speak into our lives. All right. And so, like when Moses was leading, his father-in-law spoke into his life and told him, hey, some things can be improved. The only way to guard against sin and arrogance is if you give permission. Because people normally are scared to give you feedback. Okay, if it's me, I'm not. I'll come and tell you anyway. All right, but often people are afraid. Give them permission and say, please talk to me. And know that these friends love you enough to tell you the truth. Hey, actually, that one you were showing off. Or this one, you were rude. And then keeping each other accountable when a fellow leader has fallen. You see, leadership is very lonely. And when a leader falls, it's very public. And that's when that leader needs people to come around and say, God gives you a second chance. But when there was a time when I fell, or I felt that, people weren't happy with me. And that was the time I felt everybody avoided me. Who will love me enough to say, come and be with me? You need to be that kind of a person to one another. So if a leader has fallen, go and talk to the person. And if the person does not want to admit it, you need to be able to tell this person, this is going to come out, it's going to leak, and we need to be able, so it's about people in our lives. And the danger in Christian leadership is we don't have people speaking into our lives. So I have people speaking into my life, some older, some my peers, and some younger. And that helps me to keep on track. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Annette, for also sharing your life and your own example and your own stories as you respond to the questions. And thank you for the rest of us for asking your questions. I know we have many questions that we don't have the time today to address, but don't worry. You know what? We are going to have a separate Zoom recording with both Bishop Hua Yong and Annette to address questions from 2 weeks ago and also this week. And once we have that recording ready, we will share it with each one of you. My friends, Annette has shared that leadership is truly an adventure for life, where it calls us to follow Jesus wholeheartedly, allowing God to examine our life as we serve with humility. As you think about being a leader in where God has called you, in the Christian fellowship, in the church, or even in the working world, what is one thing that God is speaking to you as He calls you to this adventure of leadership for the long haul? May I invite you to type your response in the chat. So the question I've also posted in the chat, what is one thing that God is speaking to you as He calls you to this adventure of leadership for the long haul? I invite you, you can write and type your response in whatever language you are comfortable. Thank you. I see your response. Feel free to continue to respond. You may respond in any language you are comfortable. You can write in Bahasa, you can also write in Mandarin, or in your own mother tongue if you wish to. Thank you. Thank you for your response, different one of you. Thank you for responding. So these are some response that we can see. Luangkan masa dengan Tuhan lebih dari kerja. Having a heart for Him for all of my life. Carry good values and glorify His name. Preach with my life and not just a words. Serving is not temporary, but it's lifelong serving. Berjalan bersama Tuhan dan jangan berhenti. He will always be there, like a rock. Maybe I give you one more minute or less than 1 minute to continue to type your response before we end today's session. Through Him, everything becomes possible. Have faith, my friends. Jangan jauhkan diri Anda dari panggilan Tuhan. Don't let busyness get in the way. Never compromise on coffee with God.
Subscribe to FES Malaysia YouTube channel today.